for in some situation as low and as poor as Mr. Forley's uneasy conscience would let him pick out. He may have thought of atonement on his deathbed, but not before. I am only too certain of it. Not before. A low double knock startled us. "The messenger," said Trottle under his breath. He went out instantly to answer the knock, and returned leading in a respectable-looking elderly man, dressed like Trottle, all in black, with a white cravat, but otherwise not at all resembling him. "I am afraid I have made some mistake," said the stranger. Trottle, considerately taking the office of explanation into his own hands, assured the gentleman that there was no mistake, mentioned to him who I was, and asked him if he had not come on business connected with the late Mr. Forley. Looking greatly astonished, the gentleman answered, "Yes." There was an awkward moment of silence after that. The stranger seemed to be not only startled and amazed, but rather distrustful and fearful of committing himself as well. Noticing this, I thought it best to request Trottle to put an end to further embarrassment by stating all particulars truthfully as he had stated them to me, and I begged the gentleman to listen patiently for the late Mr. Forley's sake. He bowed to me very respectfully, and said he was prepared to listen with the greatest interest. It was evident to me, and I could see to Trottle also, that we were not dealing, to say the least, with a dishonest man. "Before I offer any opinion on what I have heard," he said, earnestly and anxiously, after Trottle had done, "I must be allowed, in justice to myself, to explain my own apparent connection with this very strange and very shocking business. I was the confidential legal adviser of the late Mr. Forley, and I am left his executor. Rather more than a fortnight back, when Mr. Forley was confined to his room by illness, he sent for me, and charged me to call and pay a certain sum of money here, to a man and woman whom I should find taking charge of the house. He said he had reasons for wishing the affair to be kept a secret. He begged me so to arrange my engagements that I could call at this place either on Monday last or to-day at dusk, and he mentioned that he would write to warn the people of my coming without mentioning my name. Dorlcote is my name, as he did not wish to expose me to any future importunities on the part of the man and woman. I need hardly tell you that this commission struck me as being a strange one; but in my position with Mr. Forley I had no resource but to accept it without asking questions, or to break off my long and friendly connection with my client. I chose the first alternative. Business prevented me from doing my errand on Monday last, and if I am here to-day, notwithstanding Mr. Forley's unexpected death, it is emphatically because I understood nothing of the matter on knocking at this door, and therefore felt myself bound, as executor, to clear it up. That, on my word of honour, is the whole truth, so far as I am personally concerned." "I feel quite sure of it, sir," I answered. "You mentioned Mr. Forley's death just now as unexpected. May I inquire if you were present, and if he has left any last instructions?" "3 hours before Mr. Forley's death," said Mr. Dorlcote, "his medical attendant left him apparently in a fair way of recovery. The change for the worse took place so suddenly, and was accompanied by such severe suffering, to prevent him from communicating his last wishes to any one. When I reached his house he was insensible. I have since examined his papers; not one of them refers to the present time, or to the serious matter which now occupies us. In the absence of instructions I must act cautiously on what you have told me, but I will be rigidly fair and just at the same time. The first thing to be done he continued, addressing himself to Trottle, "is to hear what the man and woman downstairs have to say. If you can supply me with writing materials, I will take their declarations separately on the spot, in your presence and in the presence of the policeman who is watching the house. To-morrow I will send copies of those declarations, accompanied by a full statement of the case, to Mr. and Mrs. Bayne in Canada, both of whom know me well as the late Mr. Forley's legal adviser, and I will suspend all proceedings on my part until I hear from them or from their solicitor in London. In the present posture of affairs, this is all I can safely do." We could do no less than agree with him, and thank him for his frank and honest manner of meeting us. It was arranged that I should send over the writing materials from my lodgings, and, to my unutterable joy and relief, it was also readily acknowledged that the poor little orphan boy could find no fitter refuge than my old arms were longing to offer him, and no safer protection for the night than my roof could give. Trottle hastened away upstairs, as actively as if he had been a young man, to fetch the child down. And he brought him down to me without another moment of delay, and I went on my knees before the poor little mite, and embraced him, and asked him if he would go with me to where I lived. He held me away for a moment, and his wan, shrewd little eyes looked sharp at me. Then he clung close to me all at once, and said, "I'm a-going along with you, I am, and so I tell you." For inspiring the poor neglected child with this trust in my old self, I thanked Heaven then with all my heart and soul, and I thank it now. I bundled the poor darling up in my own cloak, and I carried him in my own arms across the road. Peggy was lost in speechless amazement to behold me trudging out of breath upstairs, with a strange pair of poor little legs under my arm. But she began to cry over the child the moment she saw him, like a sensible woman as she always was, and she still cried her eyes out over him in a comfortable manner when he at last lay fast asleep, tucked up by my hands in Trottle's bed. "And Trottle, bless you, my dear man," said I, kissing his hand as he looked on. "The forlorn baby came to this refuge through you, and he will help you on your way to heaven." Trottle answered that I was his dear mistress, and immediately went and put his head out at an open window on the landing, and looked into the back street for a quarter of an hour. That very night, as I sat thinking of the poor child, and of another poor child who is never to be thought about enough at Christmas time, the idea came into my mind which I have lived to execute, and in the realisation of which I am the happiest of women this day. "The executor will sell that house, Trottle?" said I. "Not a doubt of it, ma'am, if he can find a purchaser." "I'll buy it." I have often seen Trottle pleased, but I never saw him so perfectly enchanted as he was when I confided to him, which I did then and there, the purpose that I had in view. To make short of a long story, and what story would not be long coming from the lips of an old woman like me, unless it was made short by main force, I bought the house. Mrs. Bayne had her father's blood in her. She evaded the opportunity of forgiving and generous reparation that was offered her, and disowned the child. But I was prepared for that, and loved him all the more for having no one in the world to look to but me. I am getting into a flurry by being over pleased, and I daresay I am as incoherent as